My name is Grace. I'm standing in the waiting room of the hospital, my heart still pounding from the adrenaline rush. My hands are shaking, but it's not just from the recent scare. It's also from the weight of years of being underestimated by my family. Just a moment ago, I heard a familiar voice calling out across the room, Dr. Jenkins? It was Dr. Thompson, the ER chief and my supervisor. He stopped in his tracks, a clipboard in hand, a look of pure confusion on his face. My mother's head snapped towards me so fast I thought I heard her neck crack. Dr. Jenkins, I didn't know you'd be in today, Dr. Thompson said, glancing down at the chart in his hand before looking back up at me. He was clearly trying to figure out why I was standing there in shorts and a t-shirt instead of my scrubs. Then his eyes landed on little Max on the stretcher, on his mother Lily's tear-streaked face, and on my mother standing frozen beside me. Understanding dawned on his face. Wait, is this your family? Are you the one who got him breathing again? Suddenly, the waiting room, which had been filled with the usual hum of activity, fell completely silent. My mother's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. My brother Ryan, who had just walked in behind us, stopped mid-step and stared at me as if he was seeing me for the very first time. Lily looked back and forth between me and Dr. Thompson, the confusion on her face slowly giving way to what looked almost like shame. Yes, I said, keeping my voice steady, using the same professional tone I use when briefing a trauma team. Witnessed submersion, approximately 90 seconds of unresponsiveness, performed rescue breaths and compressions until spontaneous respiration. I want him evaluated for any secondary complications. Dr. Thompson nodded, immediately shifting into work mode. He called over a resident to take Max into an exam room for monitoring. But before he left, he turned to me and said the words that would change everything. Honestly, Grace, this doesn't surprise me one bit. You're one of the best doctors I've ever seen run a resuscitation. Whatever they're paying you isn't enough. He clapped a hand briefly on my shoulder and then disappeared down the hallway with the team wheeling Max away. For a long time, nobody in my family said a word. My mother's face went through a series of expressions, from confusion to disbelief to what looked uncomfortably like embarrassment. It was Lily who finally broke the silence. She turned to me with wide eyes. He called you doctor. He said you run resuscitations. Grace, I thought you were a nurse. I took a deep breath. I'm an ER physician. I have been for 6 years. I went to medical school, did my residency, and passed my boards. I'm not sure how that got lost along the way, but it did. My mother finally found her voice, but it was small, smaller than I'd ever heard it. I just always called it nursing because, I don't know, Grace. I never really understood the difference. I didn't mean anything by it. I could have let it go, like I always had before. But watching Max lying motionless on the sand, counting compressions on his tiny chest while my family stood there helpless, had burned away any patience I had left for keeping the peace at the cost of my own identity. Mom, you've known the difference for 6 years. You were at my white coat ceremony. You have a photo of me in my graduation gown on your fridge. This wasn't confusion. It was easier for you to call it playing nurse than to admit your daughter became a doctor without your help, your encouragement, and without much support from this family at all. Ryan, of all people, spoke next. She's right, he said quietly, looking at our mother and then at me. Grace, I'm sorry. I've made jokes about it for years, and I never once thought about what it actually meant. You just saved my son's life on a beach with your bare hands, and the first thing we did was make sure everyone at that party knew you were the babysitter. His voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, my brother looked at me with respect instead of just tolerance. Lily reached for my hand. Her grip was tight, grateful, and still shaking from the adrenaline. Thank you, she said. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. I don't know what we would have done. I didn't need their apologies to know that I was a good doctor. I'd spent years building a career, saving lives in the ER, a place where most people only see the worst moments. The truth of my profession didn't depend on my family's acknowledgement. But hearing them say it out loud, watching my mother's face crumble under the weight of her past words, it did something to loosen a knot in my chest that I didn't even know was still so tight. Let me take you back to the beginning of this fateful weekend. I'm an ER physician at Cedar Valley Medical Center. I've been in this role for 6 years, but to my family, I've never been Dr. Grace. I've always been the girl who plays nurse for a living. My mother, Helen, is a traditional-minded woman. She values conformity and has a very set idea of what a successful career looks like. My father, Robert, is a quiet man who usually just goes along with whatever my mother says. My brother Ryan is the golden child. He's a high-flying investment banker, making 6-figure salaries and living in a fancy penthouse in the city. He married Lily, a beautiful and well-behaved woman who fits perfectly into my mother's vision of a daughter-in-law. They have a 5-year-old son, Max. Max is the light of my life. He's got these big, innocent eyes and a smile that can light up a room. He never once asked me to explain my job. To him, I'm just Aunt Grace, the one who always has a stash of chocolates in her purse and lets him stay up late to watch cartoons. This summer, Ryan decided to throw a big lake party to celebrate Max's birthday. He rented a gorgeous house on Lake Serenity. It had a private dock, a huge wrap-around deck, and enough space to host a large gathering without anyone feeling cramped. My parents flew in from Florida, and Lily's family came up from Texas. I almost didn't go. I'd just finished a brutal stretch of overnight shifts at the hospital, and the thought of driving 4 hours for a weekend where I'd inevitably be the butt of my family's jokes again was exhausting. But then Max called me himself. His little voice on the phone, insisting that the party wouldn't be a party without Aunt Grace, was all it took to get me in my car. The first day of the party went exactly as I expected. My mother introduced me to Lily's relatives with the same old line, "This is my daughter Grace. She plays nurse at the hospital." A man I'd never met before tilted his head and asked if I liked giving injections. I just smiled and said it was a rewarding job. Explaining the truth to strangers who'd already been fed a lie seemed like a waste of breath. By the second afternoon, most of the adults had moved to the deck with their drinks, while the kids were supposed to be supervised near the water. I was sitting at a picnic table, scrolling through a text from my charge nurse about Monday's schedule, when I heard that telltale silence that always precedes a disaster. And then, a scream. Lily's scream. Before I even realized what I was doing, I was on my feet and running. Max had been playing on an inflatable raft near the dock with 2 other kids. In a matter of seconds, he'd slipped off the edge and into the deeper water. By the time I reached the shore, another guest had already pulled him out, but he wasn't breathing. His lips were turning blue, and his little body was limp on the sand as Lily screamed his name over and over, shaking him as if that could bring him back. All the noise of the party, the panic, the shocked faces of my relatives, it all vanished. I dropped to my knees beside him, tilted his chin, checked his airway, and started the rescue breaths. I counted the compressions under my breath, just like I'd done hundreds of times in the hospital. Except this time, it was Max's small chest beneath my hands. I heard someone shouting for an ambulance in the background, but I didn't look up. I focused on the rhythm, on the count, on the boy in front of me. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably less than 90 seconds, Max coughed, fluttered his eyes, and took in a ragged breath of his own. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. By then, Max was conscious, crying, and clinging to his mother. His color was slowly returning. The paramedics loaded him onto a stretcher for a precautionary trip to the hospital. I climbed into my car, hands still shaking, and followed behind. My mother rode in the car with Ryan and Lily. As we pulled into the hospital parking lot, I overheard her on the phone with our aunt. Grace was there, thank goodness. Lucky our babysitter knew a little CPR. I didn't correct her. I was too worried about Max, and I knew that we were entering Cedar Valley Medical Center, my hospital, my domain. That's how we ended up in the waiting room, where Dr. Thompson's words would expose the truth to my family. Later that evening, Max was discharged from the hospital. He was perfectly fine, already asking if he could have ice cream for being so brave. Before we left, my mother hugged me longer than she had in years. I knew old habits die hard, but something had definitely shifted. At the next family dinner, when our aunt asked what I did for a living, I watched my mother answer before I could even open my mouth. "She's an emergency room doctor," she said. And for once, there was no laughter, no joke, just quiet, simple pride. This experience has taught me that sometimes, the people who doubt us the most are the ones who need to see us in action to truly understand who we are. And that, in the end, the truth will always find a way to shine through.